MASH is one of the most successful and beloved shows in television history, and there is one reason the 4077th felt like a real family. Radar, that wide-eyed kid from Iowa with the teddy bear and the sixth sense, always knowing what everyone needed before they knew it themselves. But behind the scenes, the story between Gary Burghoff and Alda was anything but warm. For decades, people whispered. A 1983 TV Guide piece said it plainly. Loved Radar, hated Burghoff. And things were especially complicated with Alda. Now, at 90, Alda has finally opened up. Not with bitterness, not with the polished language of someone managing a legacy, but with something more honest than that. So what really happened? And where does it leave both of them today? Let's start at the beginning, because you cannot understand Gary Burghoff's complicated relationship with MASH without understanding where he came from and what he was carrying long before he ever set foot in the 4077th. Gary Rich Burghoff was born on May 24, 1943, in Bristol, Connecticut. He grew up in a Victorian house in Delavan, Wisconsin, sharing a room with his older brother David. His mother was a choreographer, poet, theater director, and songwriter, and from the time Gary was small enough to be brought along to rehearsals, he was watching performers from the wings and feeling something pull at him he didn't yet have a name for. He trained in tap dance and drumming as a child. The drumming revealed something that would define him. He had a natural ear and natural rhythm, good enough by high school to be playing with the Bud Wilbur Orchestra at Milwaukee nightclubs. Not school performances, real clubs, real music. A teenager holding his own in rooms full of adults. That was Gary Burghoff, before Hollywood had any idea who he was. He also had something else, something he was considerably less comfortable with. Gary was born with Poland syndrome, a rare birth defect named after British surgeon Alfred Poland that causes underdevelopment on one side of the body, typically affecting the hand and arm. In Gary's case, the middle three fingers of his left hand were significantly shorter than those on his right. The condition was not painful, not debilitating, and not something that affected his ability to perform or to drum or to live a full and active life. But it was visible if you knew to look, and Gary was deeply, privately self-conscious about it. Go back and watch MASH episodes now with this in mind, and you'll notice something you probably missed the first time around. Radar is almost never caught with his left hand visible and unobscured. Clipboards appear at just the right moment. Boxes, a piece of mail, his hand tucked into a pocket, his fist closed. The props were not random. They were a carefully maintained system of camouflage that Gary used through 7 seasons of television to hide something that the world might not even have cared about, but that he cared about deeply. It is extraordinary when you think about it, that such a talent could be haunted by something so small. But it goes to show you that even people on television have the fears they carry into every room. The drumming, the talent, the instinct for performance, all of it came together in Gary's earliest professional work in a way that surprises most people who think of him only as Radar. In 1967, Gary Burghoff was cast in the original off-Broadway production of You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. He didn't just appear in it, he premiered the role of Charlie Brown, the lovable, round-headed blockhead who couldn't do anything right and somehow made everyone love him for it. That was Gary on a New York stage before most of the country had any idea his name existed. It was a remarkable debut for someone who would go on to play another lovable, earnest, slightly lost young man on one of the biggest shows in television history. The casting of Radar, in hindsight, was less of a surprise than it might have seemed. And then there's the Linda Carter connection, because this one is too good to skip. In 1968, Gary landed a spot drumming for a band called The Relatives, opening at the Sahara Hotel Lounge in Las Vegas. Their lead singer was a young woman who had not yet become Wonder Woman. She was just Linda, performing every night in a Vegas lounge with a drummer from Connecticut who would one day become Radar O'Reilly. They became good friends. When Carter's New Adventures of Wonder Woman went into production years later, she remembered her old bandmate and got him a part, a 1978 episode called The Man Who Wouldn't Tell. It doesn't get more wonderfully strange than playing drums for a future Amazonian warrior princess and then showing up in her television show a decade later. In 1970, Robert Altman made the film MASH, a dark, irreverent anti-war comedy that everyone understood was really about Vietnam. It won the Palme d'Or at Cannes. Among the ensemble, Gary Burghoff's Radar stood out in a way that was difficult to explain but impossible to miss. Where most characters were sardonic and worldly, Radar was earnest and instinctive, the youngest person in the room who was also, in some fundamental way, the wisest. Gary had transformed a nickname into a human being, and audiences felt it. When the CBS television series launched in 1972, every main actor from the film was either replaced entirely or moved into a different role. Every actor except one. Gary Burghoff was the only cast member from the Altman film to reprise his role on the small screen, and he was thrilled about it. "I wanted that character to be more than just a nickname," he said, and for 7 seasons he delivered on that ambition. He won an Emmy in 1977 for Outstanding Continuing Performance by a Supporting Actor. He was nominated 4 more times. Executive producer Gene Reynolds described Radar as the character through whom younger viewers found their way into the show. "Kids could identify. I could be Radar," Reynolds said. Series creator Larry Gelbart called Gary's performance phenomenal. Amy Farr, who played Corporal Klinger, said Gary brought something to the show that none of the other characters had, a little something special, all of which makes what happened behind the scenes all the more complicated to untangle. The tension between Gary Burghoff and his castmates did not erupt suddenly. It built slowly, the way pressure builds in a confined space, through small moments and accumulated resentments in a production where some people were gaining power while others felt they were losing it. Alda arrived as the star, but became over time something more. He began writing episodes, then directing them, shaping the creative direction of the series in ways that went well beyond performing. The show bent toward his sensibility, and that was not an accident. Gary watched all of this from the position of someone who had been there first, the only link between the original film and the television series. He had given Radar his soul, and he felt, increasingly, that he was not getting his proper dues. Director Charles Dubin, who helmed 44 episodes, recalled it clearly. Gary felt not neglected exactly, but somehow owed something the show was not giving him. Gary submitted a Radar episode he had written. It was never produced. He watched Alda's scripts get made, Alda's ideas get incorporated, Alda's creative influence expand across the show in ways that Gary's own contributions could not match. And what had started as professional frustration curdled over time into something harder and more personal. A 1983 TV Guide article covering the end of MASH gathered anonymous quotes from the cast about Gary's departure and they were unsparing. Nobody wanted to be named, but the consensus was clear. Loved Radar, hated Burghoff. The feelings, the article reported, were fairly unanimous. One cast member described Gary as someone who always felt there was a conspiracy against him. He was rude to everyone, and if anyone said anything back, he would throw a tantrum. His relationship with Alda was described as particularly heated. The moment that best captures this dynamic is one that nobody on the show could have scripted. Mike Farrell, B.J. Honeycutt, Hawkeye's second best friend, sat Gary down at some point and told him plainly, "Your problem is that you can dish it out, but you can't take it." Gary Burghoff looked at him and said, without a trace of self-awareness, "And I'm getting real sick and tired of dishing it out." He did not realize, the story goes, what he had just said. The room must have gone very quiet. There were other incidents. A 1983 biography of Alda by Raymond Straight alleged that Gary and McLean Stevenson once got into a yelling match on set. Wayne Rogers, who played Trapper John, reportedly got so frustrated with Gary that he threw a chair at him. Stevenson himself acknowledged a love-hate dynamic, while also being generous enough to add, "Probably, of the six of us, he did the best job as an actor. He's a brilliant actor, but sometimes I was a problem for him, and he sometimes was a problem for me." What the gossip columns did not fully capture was the other thing happening to Gary during those years, something that had nothing to do with Alda or creative credit. His first marriage was falling apart. By the time Gary was deep into the 7th season, his home life was in crisis. His marriage, which had produced a daughter and consumed the years of his MASH run, was not surviving the pressure of what the show demanded. He had given everything to Radar, and the cost of that was there was nothing left for the people at home. Director Charles Dubin described a moment during filming of the farewell episode that stays with you. In Goodbye Radar, there is a scene where Radar describes his hopes for the future, a quiet, gentle scene. Dubin said Gary could not get through it. He broke into tears. Production had to stop. The grief in that performance was not acting. It was Gary Burghoff crying for a version of his own life the job had made impossible to hold on to. "My frequent snits and outbursts were inevitably followed by guilt feelings over what I'd just said or done," he later wrote. He knew something was wrong. He just didn't know how to stop it. The studio knew they needed to keep him. Gary Burghoff was Radar, and Radar was irreplaceable. Not in the sense that the show couldn't continue without him, because it did, for 4 more seasons, but irreplaceable in the sense that what he brought to it, that particular quality of warmth and earnest bewilderment, simply could not be replicated. The executives came to him with a $4 million contract offer to stay on for more seasons. $4 million in 1979, roughly $15 million today. Larry Hagman was earning $2.4 million as J.R. Ewing on Dallas. Michael Landon got $3.8 million for Little House on the Prairie. Carol O'Connor was at $4.8 million as Archie Bunker. Alan Alda led the MASH pack at $5.4 million. Gary would have ranked right up there with the best of them. He turned it down. He turned down $15 million in today's money, walked away from one of the most secure jobs on American television, and went home to try to repair his life. That is not the behavior of someone who is primarily driven by ego or grievance. That is the behavior of a man who finally understood that the thing he was chasing on set, recognition, creative credit, his proper dues, was not going to fix the thing that was actually broken. Gary Burghoff filmed his farewell in the two-part episode Goodbye Radar, which aired in 1979. He had left after season 7, but returned the following year specifically to give the character a proper send-off, because even in the middle of his own chaos, he understood what Radar meant to people and wanted to honor that. Radar leaves the 4077th with a discharge. Heading back to his mother's farm in Ottumwa, Iowa, he leaves behind his stuffed bear. The entire camp sees him off. Hawkeye can barely hold it together. For Gary, it was also goodbye to something else. Not just a role, but a decade of his life. The 1970 film, 8 seasons of television, and all the complicated feelings that had built up inside all of it. He went home to Connecticut and Wisconsin. He started fishing. He started painting. The wildlife painting is something people do not always know about Gary Burghoff, and it deserves more than a footnote. His first piece was called Eye to Eye, inspired by a red fox he had seen as a child, a moment of stillness and connection with a wild animal that had stayed with him for decades before he finally found a way to put it on canvas. He works in oils. His subjects are the animals he grew up watching and the ones he has cared for directly, because Gary is also a fully qualified wildlife rehabilitator who spent time at the Animal Rehabilitation Clinic in Southern California, nursing injured and abandoned animals. Brown pelicans, opossums, raccoons, gray squirrels, back to health. The love Radar showed for animals on screen was not performance. It was autobiography. He also invented fishing lures. Gary Burghoff holds a United States patent for a device called Chum Magic, an enhanced fish attractor, and a separate invention for lifting toilet seats. He is a philatelist who has been consulted by the United States Postal Service on stamp collecting. Quite the Renaissance man. He married again in 1985, a union that lasted until 2005 and produced 2 sons. He appeared on The Love Boat, Fantasy Island, and Murder, She Wrote. He starred in Aftermash and filmed a pilot called Walter, a potential spin-off that never went to series. He performed with his jazz trio, the We Three, painted, fished, and built a quiet life that looked nothing like the one the cameras had captured. And Alda? Here is where the story takes the turn that makes it worth telling in 2026. Alda is 90 years old. He has lived with Parkinson's disease since his diagnosis in 2018. A fact he disclosed himself in a New York Times interview, saying he wanted to control the story before someone else told it. He has since become an advocate for early diagnosis and open conversation about illness. He still writes, still appears in projects, and still teaches communication skills to medical students through the Alda Center for Communicating Science at Stony Brook University. At 90, he is not a man who has retired from the world. And somewhere in these later years, in this season of life, where everything has a particular weight and clarity because you understand more concretely than you did before, that time is not unlimited. Somewhere in this season, Alda posted a birthday tribute to Gary Burghoff. It was warm. It was funny. It referenced a specific shared memory, a blooper from the set involving Gary and a scene that had gotten away from him, a moment of genuine, uncontrollable laughter that Alda had witnessed and apparently treasured. "Happy birthday, Gary," the tribute said. "You gave me the longest laughing jag I ever had in the scene where you had to drop your pants and couldn't stop laughing. Hope you laughed again today." Think about what it takes to write that. The years of friction, the anonymous quotes in TV Guide, the heated relationship that everyone in Hollywood knew about, but nobody wanted to put their name to. And at the end of all of it, what Alda chose to lead with was a memory of Gary Burghoff laughing so hard he couldn't stop. Not the conflict, not the tensions, a man helpless with laughter, and the friend who was watching and remembered it for 50 years. That is the real revelation, not a tell-all, not a score-settling account of what Burghoff did wrong or why the cast was glad to see him go. A birthday message, simple and warm, from a 90-year-old man to the colleague he struggled to work with and never stopped remembering. Gary Burghoff is 82 years old in 2026. He has been largely out of the public eye for years, living the kind of life he turned down $15 million to go build, close to nature, close to his art, away from the particular madness of the entertainment industry. The teddy bear has been long retired. He does not answer to radar when people call him that in public or in private. He is Gary. He always was. What Alan Alda apparently understood somewhere in these later years is that the thing Gary Burghoff wanted from MASH, the recognition, the creative credit, the sense of being seen as more than a supporting character, was not something the show could have given him. What he needed was not a better contract. It was permission to stop, to go home, to remember that there was a man behind the character. He gave us Radar O'Reilly, the wide-eyed kid with the impossible hearing and the stuffed bear and the phone calls home to Iowa. Gary Burghoff put so much of himself into that character that the character became one of the most beloved in the history of American television. And then he stopped, turned down $15 million, walked away, and went to paint foxes and nurture injured pelicans and drum with his jazz trio in peace. At 90, Alda gave us the real reason, not the politics, not the feuds, though all of that was real. Gary left because he had poured himself entirely into a role, and there was nothing left. He had to go find himself again. The good news, looking at the man who paints foxes and drums with his jazz trio and nurses injured pelicans back to health, is that it looks very much like he did. Did you keep watching MASH after Radar left? Was Radar your favorite character, or was there someone else who had your heart? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we will see you in the next one.